shoe and kind of just sends her away. Now, Caroline, to you, does that look like just an awkward gesture? I don't know where we're going. Are we going inside? Or is that someone who is kind of like...
A single piece of jewelry is not supposed to matter this much. Yet online, across Royal Watcher forums and comment sections, a claim keeps resurfacing. That Queen Camilla wore a brooch tied to Diana, Princess of Wales, at a state banquet, and that Catherine, Princess of Wales, reacted in a way observers found impossible to ignore. Before going further, it needs to be said plainly. There is no verified footage, no palace statement, and no confirmed reporting from a credible royal correspondent establishing that this exact moment happened as described. What exists is a claim that is spread across social media and speculative commentary channels, and this analysis treats it exactly as that, a rumor worth examining, not a confirmed event. Why does a rumor like this even take hold? Because it plugs into something real. Diana's jewelry has always carried more weight than metal and stone. Her sapphire engagement ring, now worn by Catherine, is treated by the public as a symbol of continuity. Anything connected to Diana that later appears on Camilla's person becomes, fairly or not, material for scrutiny. That is the emotional terrain this rumor is planted in, whether or not the specific banquet story is true. Hi viewers, before we go further, here's a simple one for you. If you were standing in that room and had to choose a side to watch, William or Camilla, who would you have kept your eyes on, and why? Drop your answer in the comments. Now to the analysis itself. Royal commentators who study institutional behavior, rather than gossip, tend to argue that stories like this reveal less about what happened and more about what the public wants to believe happened. The Princess of Wales occupies a position built on public sympathy and stability. Queen Camilla occupies a position built on careful, decades-long image management. Any narrative that pits the two against each other, confirmed or not, taps into a tension the public has been primed to expect since long before either woman held her current title. This piece is not going to hand you a dramatized reenactment of an event nobody can confirm. Instead, it is going to walk through why this kind of rumor spreads, what it reveals about how the monarchy actually manages perception, and where the real power dynamics sit once the noise around the brooch is stripped away. Because according to royal biographers who have tracked palace communications for years, the real story in situations like this is rarely the object itself. It is who stays silent, who gets photographed next, and who the public decides to protect. That is where this analysis is headed next, and the answer is not the one most casual observers land on first. Start with the object itself, because the brooch, real or rumored, did not appear from nowhere. Diana's personal jewelry collection has been documented for decades by royal historians and auction houses, and pieces linked to her continue to carry meaning long after her death in 1997. When any similar item resurfaces on a working member of the family, commentary follows automatically. This is a pattern, not a one-time reaction. Royal observers who study protocol point out that jewelry within the family has functioned as a form of unspoken communication for generations. The late Queen Elizabeth II was known to use brooch choices that royal watchers interpreted as signals during politically sensitive periods, a practice covered extensively by British press over the years. Whether or not that tradition was intentional in every instance, the public has learned to read royal appearances that way. So when a Diana-linked item is claimed to appear on Camilla, the audience does not need confirmation to start forming a theory. The pattern alone is enough. This matters for understanding the current rumor. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has spent over a decade being framed by press and public alike as an heir to Diana's public image, warmth paired with discipline, approachability paired with duty. Camilla, Queen Consort turned Queen, has spent that same decade working to secure public acceptance after years of complicated public perception following her marriage to King Charles III. These are two very different reputational projects running side by side inside the same institution. According to several royal commentators who write about monarchy as an institution rather than personalities, this is exactly the kind of environment where an unverified rumor gains traction fast. The public already has a story in mind. Tension between the woman associated with Diana's legacy and the woman who succeeded her, and a rumor about jewelry simply gives that pre-existing story a scene to attach itself to. The banquet claim did not need to be true to spread. It only needed to fit what people already suspected. None of this confirms the incident occurred as described online. What it does confirm is that the palace has spent years managing exactly this kind of perception risk, and that is where the real analysis begins. If the palace has spent years managing perception risk around Diana's legacy, the next question is practical. How does an institution like the British monarchy actually respond when a rumor like this starts spreading, whether or not the underlying event is confirmed? Royal press offices rarely comment directly on rumors involving personal tension between family members. This is not a guess. It is a documented pattern going back through multiple decades of royal reporting, including well-known periods of speculation about relationships within the family. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have historically preferred silence over denial, on the theory that a denial can accidentally confirm that a story is being taken seriously. Commentators who cover this beat closely describe it as a deliberate communications strategy, not an accident. That silence creates a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. Without an official statement, independent commentary channels, fan forums, and speculative news pages step in to offer their own interpretation. This is precisely the environment the original rumor about Catherine and the brooch was born into. The absence of confirmation did not slow the story down. It accelerated it, because uncertainty is more shareable than a flat, boring denial. There's a pattern interrupt worth pointing out here. Most casual coverage of this rumor focuses entirely on the two women, Catherine and Camilla, as though this were purely a story about jewelry and feelings. Analysts who study the monarchy as a political institution tend to disagree with that framing. They argue the more useful question is not what Camilla wore or how Catherine reacted, it is who benefits from the public spending its attention this way at all. That question points toward two other people almost never mentioned in the casual version of this story, King Charles III and William, Prince of Wales. And once you start asking who benefits from public attention landing on a brooch instead of anywhere else, the shape of this story changes completely. Consider the position King Charles III currently occupies. He became monarch in 2022 following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, inheriting an institution that had to modernize its finances, its public role, and its relationship with a media environment that no longer waits for palace approval before publishing. Every rumor involving his wife and his daughter-in-law lands directly on his management plate, whether he wants it there or not. Royal biographers who study Charles's approach to institutional stability describe him as someone who prioritizes calm continuity over dramatic correction. That tendency shapes how a rumor like this one gets handled internally, according to commentators who track Buckingham Palace's communications patterns. Rather than address speculation directly, the preferred approach tends to be waiting it out, letting public attention move to the next news cycle on its own. But waiting has a cost, and that cost usually lands somewhere specific. Analysts point to William, Prince of Wales, as the person best positioned to gain from a rumor like this circulating without correction. If the public perceives tension between Camilla and Catherine, and William is seen standing beside his wife with visible support, he does not need to say a single word to benefit from the framing. Silence, in this reading, becomes strategy rather than absence. This is the analytical turn worth sitting with. Most people watching this story focus on who said what, who wore what, who reacted how. Commentators who study succession dynamics argue the real move belongs to whoever the public decides to sympathize with once the dust settles, and right now, that sympathy is trending toward the future king and queen of the United Kingdom, not the current one. If that reading is accurate, then the brooch was never really the center of this story. It was the trigger for a much bigger, much quieter contest, one that has been running since the day Charles became king.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, all the presents we get given from around the world are fantastic, and we're very grateful.
Yes, okay. Very diplomatic.
Here is the turn most casual coverage of this rumor misses entirely. The conversation about a brooch was never really about jewelry. It was a stand-in for a much larger, ongoing question inside the monarchy: who actually holds emotional authority with the public right now, the reigning king and queen, or the future king and queen? Royal commentators who study long-term succession patterns describe this as a slow, largely invisible contest that has been running since Charles's coronation in 2023. Camilla's public approval has grown steadily since that point, according to multiple public opinion surveys conducted by British polling organizations, but it remains built on active, ongoing management rather than the automatic goodwill Diana once received simply by existing in public. Catherine, by contrast, has spent over a decade accumulating exactly that kind of automatic goodwill, reinforced constantly by comparisons to Diana that the palace has never fully controlled and, some analysts argue, has never really tried to. That imbalance is the real subject underneath this entire rumor. A story about a brooch is simple, visual, and easy to share. A story about decades of careful reputation management inside a monarchy trying to modernize itself is not. So the public understandably gravitated toward the version it could picture. But according to analysts who take the institutional view rather than the gossip view, the brooch rumor, true or not, function as evidence of something larger already in motion. Public sentiment is quietly consolidating around William and Catherine as the emotional future of the monarchy, while Charles and Camilla continue managing the present with careful, deliberate stability. Neither side has said this out loud. Neither side needs to, and that is exactly why this story will not end with the brooch. If this reading holds, the next public appearance involving these four people will be read differently than it would have been read a year ago, watched not for what is said, but for who stands where, who is photographed beside whom, and who the cameras find first.
With Harry and I scratching our heads going, how can we do something that's going to help us in the future? How are we going to build something that's going to provide almost a vehicle to allow us to impact in charitable areas? Because it's quite difficult at the time.
If sympathy is quietly shifting toward William and Catherine, the next question is what that shift actually looks like in practice, because power inside a monarchy rarely announces itself. It shows up in small, deliberate choices that most viewers scroll past without noticing. Royal commentators who track palace scheduling point to something worth examining here. In the months following any period of public speculation, palace communications teams tend to adjust the visibility of certain family members, not through statements but through appearances. More solo engagements for one figure, more joint appearances for another. According to analysts who study this pattern across previous controversies involving the family, these shifts are rarely accidental. They are how an institution without a formal comment policy still manages to say something. This is where the brooch rumor connects to something bigger than a single banquet. If Catherine's public appearances increase in frequency or visibility following a period of speculation, commentators argue that reflects a deliberate choice by royal communications staff to lean into public sympathy rather than let it sit unaddressed. If William is positioned more prominently beside her during that window, that reinforces the same read. None of this requires a single public word from anyone inside the family. The scheduling does the talking. Compare that to how Camilla's public role tends to be managed during sensitive periods. Multiple royal biographers have noted, across her time as both Duchess and Queen, a consistent pattern of steady, low-drama engagements focused on causes rather than personality. This is widely understood among royal watchers as a deliberate, long-term strategy, building acceptance slowly rather than chasing sympathy quickly. It has worked for over 2 decades, but it is a strategy built for stability, not for competing head-to-head against a moment of public sympathy running in someone else's favor. That difference in strategy, one built for slow trust, one built for fast emotional connection, is what turns a rumor about jewelry into something with real institutional weight. And according to commentators who study this dynamic closely, the next several months of public appearances are where that weight will start to show. Every institution eventually pays a price for the stories that circulate around it, whether or not those stories are ever confirmed, and the monarchy is no exception. The cost here is not financial. It is emotional, and it is carried differently by each person involved. Start with Catherine, Princess of Wales. Royal commentators have long pointed out that she carries a comparison she never asked for, measured constantly against a mother-in-law she never met. Every public appearance gets filtered through that lens, whether she addresses it or not. A rumor like this one adds weight to a comparison that was already there long before any brooch entered the conversation. Camilla, Queen of the United Kingdom, carries a different kind of weight. She has spent more than 2 decades working to secure public acceptance following her marriage to King Charles III. Acceptance that opinion polling shows has grown significantly but remains, according to multiple British polling organizations, more conditional than the goodwill extended to other senior royals. A rumor like this one, true or not, adds pressure to a reputation that has always required active maintenance rather than automatic trust. William, Prince of Wales, carries the weight of protection, both personal and institutional. Commentators who study his public conduct describe a consistent pattern of positioning himself as a steady presence beside Catherine during periods of public scrutiny, a role some analysts trace directly back to his own experience watching his mother navigate public attention without that same protection. Whether or not that reading is accurate, it is the read much of the public has settled on. And Charles, King of the United Kingdom, carries the weight of holding all of this together. Every rumor involving his wife and his daughter-in-law becomes, whether he wants it or not, a test of his ability to manage a modern monarchy through a media environment his mother never had to face at the same scale. None of this is anger. According to royal historians who study the institution's long relationship with Diana's memory, this is something closer to inherited history. 4 people managing a legacy none of them created, but all of them are required to carry. Strip away the emotion, and what remains is closer to a chessboard than a family drama. And this is where the analysis gets sharper. Ask the question analysts keep circling back to: who actually gained something from this moment, confirmed or not? Not sympathy in the abstract, but real, measurable public attention. According to commentators who track royal media coverage, moments like this one tend to produce a short-term spike in coverage of whoever is positioned as the sympathetic party, and a corresponding dip in coverage tone for whoever is positioned as the source of tension. That is not speculation about feelings. That is a pattern observable in how outlets frame headlines during and after periods like this. Here is the pattern interrupt worth sitting with. Silence, in this context, is not the absence of a move. Royal commentators who study palace communications argue it is often the most calculated move available. A public statement can be picked apart, quoted, and turned into more controversy. Silence cannot. It simply leaves the existing narrative in place. And if that existing narrative already favors one side, silence becomes a way of letting the favorable version stand unchallenged. That is why analysts increasingly describe this as a moment that may have shifted, not the facts of any single evening, but the visibility trajectory of 2 future monarchs. Catherine gains emotional authority. William gains a reputation for quiet protection. Camilla's institutional stability holds steady, but the emotional comparison gap, the one she has managed for over 20 years, does not close. It widens slightly, according to this reading, every time a story like this circulates without a firm correction. Perception, inside a monarchy, functions as a form of real power. It shapes which family member gets the warmer headline, the longer applause, the benefit of the doubt, and according to this analysis, the palace lost control of that perception the moment this rumor started spreading, whether or not the underlying event was ever real. What happens next depends entirely on what the public decides to remember. Here is where this story stops being about a single evening and starts being about a direction the entire monarchy may already be moving in. Royal commentators who study long-term institutional patterns argue that moments like this rarely stay contained to one news cycle. They tend to accumulate into what analysts describe as a visibility trajectory, a slow, cumulative shift in how the public assigns emotional trust across the family. If that reading holds, several things become worth watching closely in the coming months. William, Prince of Wales, is expected by royal biographers to continue expanding his public role gradually, a pattern already visible since he became Prince of Wales in 2022. Analysts suggest moments of public sympathy toward Catherine tend to accelerate that expansion rather than slow it down, reinforcing his image as a steady, protective future king. Catherine, Princess of Wales, is positioned, according to several royal watchers, to keep absorbing comparisons to Diana whether she invites them or not. From a public relations standpoint, this comparison functions less like a burden and more like an asset, one that continues building the same kind of automatic public warmth Diana held throughout her public life. Camilla, Queen of the United Kingdom, faces a narrower challenge. Her long-term strategy of steady, low-drama public service has built real acceptance over 2 decades. But commentators note that strategy was built for a slower news environment, one less shaped by instant social media speculation. Whether that approach can keep pace with rumors that spread in hours rather than months remains, according to several analysts, an open question. And King Charles III continues managing something no monarch before him has faced in quite the same way, a media landscape that no longer waits for the palace to speak first. Diana's legacy, more than a quarter century after her death, remains an active force inside decisions the family makes today. According to royal historians, that legacy is not fading. It is becoming a permanent variable in how every future royal moment gets read by the public. None of this is settled. All of it is being watched. There was never a confirmed confrontation here, and that fact matters as much as anything else covered in this analysis. What exists is a rumor, a pattern of public reaction, and an institution that has spent decades learning how to manage exactly this kind of moment without ever fully controlling it. What this analysis has tried to show is that the monarchy does not run on confirmed events alone. It runs on interpretation, and interpretation has its own momentum, one the palace can influence but never fully direct. A brooch, real or rumored, became a lens for something the public was already primed to watch closely: the balance of emotional trust between the family's present leadership and its future one. Royal commentators who study this institution long-term tend to agree on one point. The monarchy is not built like reality television, with resolutions and clean endings. It is built more like a long, slow chess match, where the most important moves are often the quiet ones nobody points a camera at. Diana's legacy remains part of that board, more than 25 years after her death, still shaping how the public reads every gesture from the people who came after her. What happens next is not written yet. The next public appearance involving Catherine, Camilla, William, and Charles will be watched differently than it would have been a year ago, and that alone tells you something has already shifted, whether or not anyone inside the palace ever confirms it out loud. If this kind of forensic look into the hidden dynamics of the royal family is something you want more of, this channel is where that analysis lives. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story. And if this one gave you something to think about, share your take in the comments. Someone else reading it might see this family and this legacy a little differently because of what you have to say.
Bigger than that, this isn't just about happy, healthy children. This is about the society I hope we could and can become. Right from the early days, meeting lots of people who are suffering with